Man, feels good to see you all again. It's been forever. I know I've been so on and off with the videos lately. I feel really bad about not being more consistent with them. But over the past 12 months, everything has been really crazy for all of us in many different ways. For me, it's been with business. Business has taken off just more than I could have ever imagined. Very thankful for it. But that's taken up the majority of my time over the last 12 months. Ever since pretty much the pandemic happened in March, I've just been swamped. So I've got some good people helping me out now, and I should have a lot more time to bust out these videos, which honestly, I would rather be doing videos, seeing all you guys, than doing business. So that's the plan moving forward. And with that being said, I've got some cool stuff to do in today's video. I've got a bunch of stuff to catch up on and got a bike to build. So let's jump into it. All right, we are going to be getting back to work on this RM250 that I've been building kind of on and off over the past year or so. This is where we left off in the last video. We were working on the frame, swing arm, and triple clamps and linkage. So today we're going to be getting the triple clamps and linkage squared away. And also, I got some tinkering to do on this bike too. First thing up is the linkage. I'm going to pop in fresh bearings and seals. Had this linkage all shined up, looking like a factory piece. Had to wipe a bunch of dust off it. Been sitting for a few months, but I've always had good luck with Pro X components, so that is what I'm using here. And I will be installing these using a sweating in method, but I'm using a little different product. It's actually a cold spray. I'm excited to see how this works. It's always a good idea to lay everything out, make sure you've got all the pieces you need, and just kind of eye up how everything's going to go together. So let's take this over to the vise, and we can start pressing these in. Now, to protect your part from marring in the vise, I like to use either a pair of soft jaws like these or just cut up an old tube. For this, I'm actually going to use part of a tube just because it seems like the bearings go in Illustrator. This just has too much flex to it. Now, with the vise ready for action, I'm going to give you a rundown of what we're doing here. So we're using a combination of heat and cold. Got a cold, like a refrigerant can here, and then a torch. We're going to heat up the linkage, cool down the bearing, and that is going to shrink the bearing, expand the linkage, and it should just slide right in. And you'll notice on these bearings there's a flat edge on one side, rounded edge on the other. We're going to press on the flat side. Just gives us a little better, flatter surface to press on. All right, I've got my sweet gardening gloves on so I don't burn or freeze myself. I'm going to heat up the linkage. Give it some even heat. So I've never used this stuff before. I'm guessing it's going to cause some condensation. You can see lots of water running off of it. So I want to make sure we are greasing it afterwards. All right, we've got to move pretty quick. So I don't think this cold spray is getting it cold enough. It says it chills it down to negative 60 Fahrenheit, which seems like it would be cold enough, but not really doing the trick. The reason I'm not using dry ice in this scenario is because I can't find any. They're using it to ship the vaccine actually, so impossible to find anywhere. So I am just going to have to use some heat, and I'm going to throw the rest of the bearings in the freezer, and I'm just going to have to press them in, which it'll work just fine. Alright, got the linkage nice and warm. Going to get this bearing in straight. Sometimes they're a little tricky to get going perfectly straight, which is obviously key when you start pressing. I'm going to put the pin in the bearing just to hold all the needles in place and take it over to the vise. Not that it matters a ton, but I always like to put the bearing in the center of the vise here with the bearing on the leading edge. I don't really know if it makes a difference. This is my superstition. And then you're going to start pressing her in. So this bearing's binding a little bit going in the rest of the way. What you can do is take it out of the vise, heat it up again, and at some point this spacer will get in the way, so you can take that out. And then just carefully press this thing in the rest of the way. So now we are flush with the edge there. We're going to take a socket, something that fits perfectly with the outside diameter of that bearing. Looks like that one's really close. And we're gonna wanna put this bearing directly in the middle of the linkage here. So we'll actually get out the calipers and measure it once we're getting close. Give that thing a couple turns and maybe take it out, measure it. 409 and 412. So we are pretty much spot on in the center of the linkage. Squirt a little grease in here. Take an acid brush and just wipe it across. You don't want to disturb the bearings too much. Put a little grease for the seals. Tell you what, this little mini grease gun with the fine tip is the ticket for this kind of stuff. Pop in the seal. Maybe do one more round of grease in there. It's looking a little bit thin. And these needle bearings, even when they're new, can fall apart pretty easily. So just brush in to out. You don't want to go across. A little bit of grease on our spacer. Slide her right in. So that's one bearing down. All right, on to the next bearing. So I'm going to give this heat and cold spray trick another try. Let's heat up this linkage. So it seems like it works initially, moves in a little bit, but then the parts basically just reach an equilibrium and that's about it. So we're just gonna have to press all these in, I'm guessing. I don't think that cold spray gets quite as cold as dry ice. Now what I like to do to make sure this bearing is going in straight, put the spacer through and put it on a flat table. And just use a little rubber mallet to tap that thing. Just get it started initially. Having that spacer in there kind of guides the bearing in and makes it so the needles don't fall apart, and also just make sure you don't get chunks of plastic in that bearing. Every time I push a little bit, I like to take it out. Just make 100% sure that thing is going in straight. Nothing worse than something going in crooked and having to order new bearings because of it. And now we can just pretty much knock out the other side of this bearing as well as these two as well. They're all going to be the same. Now on these bores that have a bearing on either side, you definitely want to have that spacer in there just to make sure everything is going in straight. And also what's key is the condition of your bearing bore. You want to make sure there's no nicks or burrs in there. I might be going crazy, guys. I completely spaced on the fact that there's a seal that goes in there. So I'm going to push these bearings in a little bit further, just enough for that seal to press in there and fit flush. Now if you want to get real technical, you can take out calipers, measure the thickness of that seal, 3.8 millimeter, and correspond that to the depth here. Just gonna pop in here with a quick little reminder for you guys. The 2021 bike build contest that I'm hosting is still going on. You have until May 10th to get your builds done. You can still sign up for this contest online at primemx.com. To give you a quick little synopsis of what this contest is all about, you take an old road out bike like what we're doing here with this RM, fixing it up, getting it running sweet, getting it looking good, and your build is judged on the biggest transformation. So you do a before video, a during video, and an after video. You submit it to our panel of judges, among the likes of Cole Seeley, Jay Dungy, we got Tyler Monaghan, and Charles Lytle, and myself. We're going to be judging these builds, and in the end, there's $5,000 up for grabs, a total of 25 winners. So, really cool deal. If you guys would like the full details on this, click the link down below in the description. All right, guys, linkage is all done, thankfully. I know they can be pretty tricky sometimes. Even I struggle with them at times getting those bearings in straight, but this one turned out good. The kit I used, the Pro X kit, I will have it linked down below. Now there's one more thing I want to do with the linkage, and that is to protect this awesome finish. Love this brush look. As you can see, it got a little bit stained or a little bit dull from the grease and press it in those bearings. So I'm going to rebrush it with a hand pad here, get that awesome finish all shined up again. And then I'm going to do a ceramic coating on it. It's called a nano ceramic, similar to what they use on a lot of cars these days, but I've had really good luck with it in testing, and I'm going to use it on the linkage arms, and actually the swing arm as well. So the first step is to clean it up with alcohol after I brush it, of course, and then that ceramic just basically wipes right on. Alright, I've got the ceramic applied to the applicator here. I'm going to start with the tighter areas. Basically, we're just going to follow the same pattern here with the brushing. Try to go in the same direction. It's important you're wearing gloves when you do this. You don't want to get this ceramic on your hands, nor do you want to get the part full of the oil from your skin. Alright, I think I got the tough areas pretty much good. Gonna apply a little more product, and now I can do the outside. Just gonna hang it from one of these hooks and hang it up somewhere for it to dry. Should only take 2 to 3 minutes for this to dry. Be a good idea to rebrush this before I coat it as well. The nice thing about this brushed aluminum, it just takes a couple seconds to touch it up and make it look just as good as the day you finished it. Got the swing arm all coated. You can see it's a little bit more glossy. Check these other parts I've got over here. These should be all dry. Yeah, looks pretty sweet. Still maintains that brush look, but doesn't add the super thick coating on it. That's what I like about this stuff. So in testing, the ceramic has worked just phenomenally well. It's protected against like fingerprints. The water just beads on it. It doesn't really allow for dirt to stick to it. It prevents against most corrosion. Durability seems pretty good so far, but I'm gonna test this coating a lot more. Supposed to let it dry a little bit longer before you put any grease or oils to it, but I'll for sure have more info on this product as I use it more. Now we're gonna move on to the triple clamps. They're actually from a 2007 RM250. Now there's a few different reasons why I'm swapping these onto the RM. Number one, they are a different offset. Offset is basically how much the forks are offset from the steering stem, and the offset is how far forward the forks are in the triple clamp. Second reason why I'm mounting these onto the RM is because the top triple clamp is different. Different mounting system for the bars allows you to run a fat bar if you so desire. I believe these are for 1.1/8", and they're actually rubber mounted as well. You can see it's got little rubbers in there to help with absorbing the vibration. So that's a plus. This is the older triple clamp from the 2001. You can see it's solid mounted. And also these are for 7/8" bars, and you can't run fat bars without running an adapter, and the adapter makes your bars taller. So just a better setup with this clamp set. For you guys that have an RM or want to build an RM in the future, pay attention to this. I put some info together for you guys. If you're not building an RM, maybe you want to skip ahead a minute or two in the video. So I put together this little sheet, did some research, and it kind of breaks down what the offsets are and what forks are on which bikes, what you can swap. So basically this is a 2001 RM250, runs a 24.5mm offset on the triple clamps, and uses a 46mm KYB fork. Basically, Suzuki kept the same offset from 2001 to 2003 for the RM250, 2001-04 for the 125, and then they went to a 22.5 offset in 2004 or 5 for the 125, and kept that same offset from there on out. And there was a lot of good feedback on the later RMs, the 125s and 250s. People loved them. They turned really sharp. And so in looking at that, it would be wise to run a 22.5 millimeter offset instead of the 24. And so that is the reason I'm going to a 22.5 offset. And the other thing to take in consideration here is the diameter of the fork mounting surfaces here, the bores there. So we have two different forks here. Suzuki used a 47 millimeter Showa on all of these bikes up to 2009 and even past that, except for the 01 to 03 RM250, which uses a KYB fork. But as you can see here, the diameters for the upper and the lower are the same, comparing the KYB and the Showa. So basically, we have the 01 triple clamp here. The diameters for the forks are going to be all the same, so you can run the KYB fork in the Showa triple clamps if you so desire. That's what we're going to be doing here, because I don't want to swap forks, and this is more of a budget build here. But basically, the 22.5 offset triple clamps is a nice little upgrade for the older bikes. Allows you to run different bars and helps the cornering ability a little bit. Now, this is a completely different subject. If you want to swap the entire front end, meaning the triple clamps, forks from a newer RM or RMZ onto the older bike, you can certainly do that. However, if you are running RMZ forks on your RM, you will need to use the RMZ wheel and brakes and axle, because it does use a different size axle or different width axle. So keep that in mind. And apparently you can run a front end from an RMZ 250 or 450 all the way up to probably 2020 or 2021. It'll bolt directly onto the RM frame. Now, here's another thing to take into consideration too. The steering stop on, let me grab a different triple clamp. All right, this is the 2001 triple clamp. As you can see, uses different steering stops compared to the RMZ, but I did mock up the newer RMZ triple clamps on the RM frame, and you can get away with that. It's not going to run into any issues. The forks aren't going to smash into the radiators or really hit anything, so you can get away with it if you want to. What you could do is drill and tap your frame, put in a little bolt for a steering stop, or come up with a different alternative there. However, on this bike, there aren't going to be any issues with running the RMZ triple clamps on there, so we're just going to go with it. Hope that wasn't too boring. Hope I didn't rant too long, but basically there's a whole lot of options for improving the front end of your RM. If you want to just go with triple clamps like what we're doing with the RMZ clamps, or you want to swap your entire front end, that is entirely possible. But all you RM guys, screenshot this or just save the video for future reference. So basically, I've got some work to do on these RMZ clamps. I'm going to pop off the bearing, clean up some of the casting lines on it. I'm going to Cerakote them, put new bearings in, put new races in the frame, and install the clamps onto the frame. Now you guys might remember me doing this in the last video, but to remove the lower steering stem bearing, you basically just got to clip the outer race with a pair of side cutters here. It's kind of tough to get in there. Kind of pry it up with a screwdriver. Basically just gotta destroy it. And then you want to take a hammer and a punch, and you can just tap this thing right off of there. It's gonna chip in a few places too, so watch out. You want to go as evenly as you can. Got the triple clamps all stripped down, and I'm going to take a flap wheel and smooth out some of these casting lines that you see on the edge. I'll give it a nice smooth look once I Cerakote it. This bottom has more prominent line all the way across. I'm going to smooth all that out. Should look pretty sweet. I'm going to use a 180 grit flap wheel for that. Looks like this triple clamp got banged up pretty good right here. Good thing I got the flap wheel out and I noticed it. I can smooth all that out too. Just hopefully it didn't mess up the board all. It's crazy how fast that wheel smoothed that out. Did a really good job. Looks like it never happened. It's got a little bit more to do right here, but man, this thing is looking sweet. It's amazing what you can do with a little bit of sanding. Just gives it that kind of cool billet look, but it's still just a stock cast piece. And of course, you can go even further if you want with this. You can grab a different wheel and make all this uniform and consistent and leave it like a brush look. You can even smooth out all this as well. You guys that do metal finishing and metal polishing, you know what I mean. It's addicting. You can just keep going with it. Now let's get to the bottom triple clamp. Now if you're having some trouble getting into some of these tighter areas where that 1 inch wide wheel can't quite fit, you can throw one of these wheels on. It is called a rough cleaning wheel. It's pretty abrasive, but not as wide, so it'll get in some of these tighter spots a little better. If that 180 grit wheel isn't cutting quite fast enough for you, you can throw a 80 grit on. This thing cuts really quick, although you do want to finish it up with a 180 because it will leave a pretty rough finish. These things smoothed out really nicely. I was tempted to keep polishing on them. Got all those casting lines blended in. Next step is to sandblast these and prep for the Cerakote. I'm also going to do the bar mounts as well. Got to figure out what color I want to do this stuff. Parts are all done with blasting. I'm just going to drop them into a bucket of acetone for 30 minutes. Just let them soak. Just allows it to remove any remaining oil or residue off the parts. While I'm coating those RM parts, I figured I'd do this Kickstarter as well. This is for Haley's bike. It's pretty crusty, but the old one that's on there is falling apart, so I am going to Cerakote this one black. All the parts are done with soaking, and I've got them hung up on the rack ready for preheat. Now basically preheat is putting them in the oven at 300 degrees for a full hour. Just burns off any contaminants and gets them ready for coating. I'm going to do black on the bar mounts on the Kickstarter, and then I'm going to do a, let's see what the color is. It is called a tungsten for the triple clamps. You guys probably won't believe this. I was just thinking about it, but it's been about a full year since I've sprayed any Cerakote. Nice to get away from the addiction a little bit, but I'm going to mix up the black with the catalyst here in the beaker at a 12-to-1 ratio. Looking pretty sweet. I freaking love that tungsten color. Really nice looking color. So since these are an oven cure Cerakote, they're gonna go back in the oven for curing. I'm gonna put them in for another hour at 300 degrees. Actually, After spraying, you want to let them sit here and dry for about 15 minutes before going in the oven. While those parts are in the oven, we've got another little project to work on. This is the stock exhaust system for Haley's bike, the XR80. She's been wanting something a little bit quieter than the BBR. It's pretty loud. She's pretty new at riding, so it is a little intimidating. I was thinking about just swapping the spark arrestor onto the BBR pipe. That would quiet it down a little bit, but then the header doesn't have a heat shield on it, and a few people have gotten burnt on here. In fact, there's probably still some skin left over. Her sister roasted her leg right here. So anyways, I'm just going to swap the entire stock system onto the XR, and I'm going to sell that one. So if you're watching this video, this system is up for sale on the website. I will have it linked down below. It is all still really fresh. All the coatings are nearly perfect. It's got fresh packing in it, but I'm gonna go clean up this thing, give her some fresh paint, and bolt her on. You know, I was just gonna rattle can this exhaust, but I figured I'd do it right. I was looking through my Cerakote selection and found that I had some air cure in graphite black, which is actually what I did the BBR exhaust in. Seems to hold up really good. So I just gotta wipe this stuff down with acetone, and then we can spray her out. And if you're ever gonna use this air cure Cerakote, one thing that's very important is you gotta shake it up really, really good. I'm talking like throw it in the washing machine, kind of shake it up. If it's not mixed fully, meaning like all the solids off the bottom aren't mixed in, it ain't gonna cure very well. The exhaust sprayed out really nicely. I'm gonna let this stuff cure overnight before I bolt it on the bike, but it'll take about 3 to 4 days for it to fully cure. But what I'm more excited about are these parts that are all the way cured, all the way done, actually with this oven cure. As soon as it's cool to the touch, it is ready to go. You can use it. But man, these colors turned out sweet. I love this contrast between the black and the tungsten. Come to think of it, that tungsten actually looks pretty close to the frame. Yeah, just a little flatter. That'll look really good though. But I guess what's up next is putting a new bearing on the lower, and then I'm gonna knock in some new races on the frame. You know what, this is kind of bugging me, probably bugging you guys too. The top of the stem's a little crusty. I'm gonna bring it over to the bench grinder and clean it up with this finer wheel. While I was at it, cleaned up the lower nut as well. Now for bearings, this set comes with both races, both bearings, and both seals. This set is from Pro X, always quality stuff. All right, to start, we're gonna grab a seal. You want the lip facing up. It's gonna go down the stem. And we're gonna grab a bearing. And it's definitely gonna be easier to pack this bearing with grease before you press it onto the stem. So there's a couple different ways to do this. You can buy a bearing packer, or you can just simply grab some grease, put a big blob in your palm here. Just grab your bearing and just simply run it through that grease until you start to see grease come out in between the inner and outer race. It's kind of a messy process, but you know what? It's just kind of how dirt bikes are. And as you're working that in, just like press it and roll it. That'll really work the grease in there quick. So we should be pretty well packed at this point. When you turn the bearing, you can see that grease coming out in between the inner and outer part of the bearing. Now to press that bearing onto the stem, we're gonna use a stem bearing installer tool, I guess you'd call it. And I believe it is this adapter here. Let me size it up. I'll show you on the non-greasy bearing. You just want to make sure this is hitting on the inner race of the bearing and not on the outer. Just make sure you're hitting on this part. Not a bad idea to put some grease on the stem just to help that bearing slide on a little easier Absolutely make sure you have that seal on before you press the bearing on. I've made that mistake before of leaving out that seal. It'll cost you a new bearing. Get the adapter into place, and this is the tool we're going to pound on. And let's get this thing started. Take a peek, make sure it's going on straight. But as we're getting close to the bottom here, you want to make sure you don't go too tight onto that seal. So at the end, just give it a couple light taps, check the seal, check the bearing, make sure it's not binding up at all. And the seal is tight on there, bearing still spins freely. So we are going to call that good. Man, this tool makes installing your lower bearing just a breeze. Super simple, anyone can do it. If you guys want to check out this tool, I will have it linked down below. It is an absolute lifesaver when you are doing these lower bearings. Let's move on to getting these races in the frame. All right, to knock out these old races, I'm going to put a block of wood underneath the head of the frame. Then you can use something to catch the edge of the race on the bottom. I've just got an old extension here I use for hammering on. And they actually make a race tool with like these little fingers that grab it. I knocked it out just fine. Got it. Yeah, just a beat up old extension. You want to find one with something even with like a little hammered lip on it. Works good to catch the edge of that and just punch it out. You want to clean up that bore where the race sits. Check for any burrs, anything that'll hold up that new race from going in. Now to press in the races, you can use a tool like this. This one is from Tusk. It comes with all these different size adapters, a shaft that runs through the head of the frame, and then you put this handle on the end of it and you can kind of press it in there. Although I've had really good luck just with using the adapter along with this handle and simply just tapping in with that. Let's figure out what size adapter I'm gonna need. This one looks like it is the closest. And then this handle just snaps into the adapter and you just take a hammer and tap that thing in. Once it looks like it's all the way in, I'll take a little pick, run it along the back side of the race, make sure there's no gap. You want it fully seated in there. Let's go ahead and do the top one. Alrighty, that was easy enough. Guess we could slide the triple clamp into the frame at this point. Let's go ahead and throw a little extra grease on this bearing. Slide this thing on through. Then of course we're gonna have to pack the upper bearing too. You want to make sure that seal lip is facing down. We can get our lower nut on. This kind of sets the tension for the steering head. We'll go ahead and set the tension on that nut once we have all the forks and everything assembled. Got to make sure everything's spinning smoothly, not binding up at all. Feels good. All right, we can get this top triple clamp and bar mount assembly back together. I was kind of surprised to see these dampers on the bottom. Looked like they had been cut, but once I looked it up, these are actually how they come from the factory. Time to toss the top clamp on and see how she looks on there. I am really liking that, guys. Really digging the neutral colors on this build. You can start to see the theme come together as we bolt a few pieces on the frame, but what do y'all think? Man, whoever ends up with this bike is gonna be one lucky fella. I'm almost kind of rethinking this. I should almost keep this bike for myself. I'm digging it so much, but if you guys have not heard, I am giving this bike away completely free. Just a fun way to give back to you guys that enjoy the channel. So if you want to sign up to possibly win the RM, just hit the link down below in the description. Back to the XR exhaust. It's looking pretty good. Gonna get it bolted together and slapped on the bike. I don't know if I mentioned this about the Air Cure Cerakote, but it is good up to 1800 degrees, so it'll hold up good on an exhaust system. Now, a big problem that I've run into on these exhaust systems is the bolts getting stuck in there, and they end up snapping off in the header. And so it is a good idea to put some anti-seize on these. The heat in combination with some rust really gets those things stuck. Now, I'm not going to say that looks any better, as I really do like the look of the BBR system on there, but since I know Haley will probably enjoy riding a little bit more with a quieter pipe, I'm all for it. But we need to swap out this Kickstarter. The rubber on this one fell off and we lost it, and it just wouldn't stay on there. So the one I have here is actually from a CRF 100. Has a little grippers built into it, so it'll work a little better. Now, the last thing I need to do to get this little XR ready for the riding season is to install a new petcock. The old one's been leaking pretty good on this bike. Well, that is going to be it for today's projects. I want to say thank you to you guys for being patient with me. I really want to get back on a consistent basis with doing these videos. Honestly, I'm a lot happier when I'm doing them, and I think you guys really enjoy them too. So thank you for watching, and also keep an eye out for the next couple days. I'll have a video drop in. I will be prepping up the track out here, doing some riding with some buddies, and so I'm going to film it all and make a video out of it. So I think that should be a good time. But until then, take care, guys.